somehow if you share your failures, there's this fear. I had this fear that it was like, oh, well, people won't want to hire me or trust me if I like, it seems like I don't want to know what I'm doing, right? Again, people won't invest their money if like I talk about these failures that I have. And I actually think it's totally the opposite. I think people want to feel seen in you. Like I've gravitated to others so much more when they have opened up and been vulnerable about this types of thing. Cause I feel like this is more the reality than stratospheric rise to success, no failures along the way. Like that basically happens to no one.
It seems to be like the number of failures is somehow correlated to the level of success that folks get. Welcome back to another episode of the Art of Online Business podcast. Jamie's gone today because our daughter has a parent-teacher conference sort of thing at school. So she says hi, but she will not be with us. You can see that there is a gentleman across the screen from me, and his name is Justin Moore. You're going to like this episode and the next one coming up, because if you've ever tried to get a sponsor for your YouTube channel, for your podcast, what have you, then you know how nerve-wracking it can be to find the right businesses, talk to them, and then wonder how you should respond to what they're saying. And he is a specialist at this. He's a sponsorship coach. He's the founder of Creator Wizard, which is a school and community that teaches you how to find and negotiate your dream brand deals so that you stop leaving thousands on the table. I've had the pleasure of talking with him as I was navigating a sponsorship deal, which I did so successfully for this very podcast. Justin brings a unique perspective. Not only has he been a creator in the trenches doing sponsorships for years, but he's also run an agency. And we're going to talk about that more in this episode as we just kind of explore and see how he's ran business for the past, I guess, decade and a half, Justin? Is that about right?
That's about right. Yeah, almost 15 years.
15 years. Wow. So you got insider knowledge behind the scenes, how to get big brands to choose which influencers to partner with, because you ran an influencer agency back in the day and you know why they pass on others. You just told me before we hit record, Justin, that you've uploaded over 2,000 videos to your YouTube channel.
It's crazy, man. I mean, we, the quick story is that my wife, April, started her first YouTube channel in 2009, actually. So like way back in the day. And I was not even doing any of this. I was in medical devices. I was going on the corporate kind of 9-to-5 career trajectory. She just kind of got an email from a brand essentially saying, hey, like, can we send you our thing for free? And she was like, yes, awesome. And so she started getting, she's like, does this look legitimate? And I was like, I think so. And so she started getting a bunch of free stuff. And then ultimately, after, that kind of the lure of that wore off a bit, I was in business school at the time going through all these like sales and marketing classes and things like that. So I basically told her, I said, April, I feel like these brands should be paying you. Like there's all these people in your comment section saying, oh, thanks so much. I just bought it. Or I went to the store and I picked this up. Thank you so much for the recommendation. And so I said, the next time a brand reaches out offering a free thing, ask them if they have a budget to collaborate with you. She's like, there's no way anyone's going to pay me. I said, just try it. And so the next brand that reached out, I remember this, it was a Korean skincare brand called Imamoko. And they reached out asking, I'll never forget this. And they asked her, again, free stuff. And she said, actually, do you have a budget to collaborate with me? And they said, sure. If you include us in 2 videos per month, like a shout out, we will pay you $700 a month for 6 months. Mind you, we are like early 20s, like no money, basically right out of school. And so that was like almost all of our rent, right, at that time. And so immediately in our mind was just like, wow, it was just this like, when you're in a normal kind of W-2 corporate job, it's like your paycheck is like you make the same amount a month, same amount every month, and then maybe a cost of living raise every year, or a little bit of a bonus or something, right? But like once our eyes opened up to like this, wow, you can make money in these uncapped ways where there's no ceiling, that really started this whole journey for us.
Wow. That had to have been exciting, and clearly it shaped like your path over the past years. Before we continue to go back and focus on that and just learn about your journey, can you give us a snapshot of your business now?
Sure. So almost like if you look at the arc of it, like, we were very much creators in the beginning and in the trenches and all that stuff too. And like now our kind of personal creator journey is sunsetting a bit, where we're able to take a step back on personally creating content on the channels that we came up on, because I've now shifted to educating creators with this new business. So for the last 4 years or so, I've run this company called Creator Wizard, where I focus on sponsorship strategy education. And so the snapshot for our business today is, I have 3 full-time employees, a director of ops, a operations coordinator, and social media admin. I have a smattering of contractors. We're doing we have our offer ladder is essentially, well, in its current form right now, we have a course, which is $14.97, which is $1,500, an on-demand course called Brand Deal Wizard, which has been kind of the signature offer for the longest time. And then we have a coaching program, which is called Wizards Guild. And this is something, kind of an inversion on the traditional management model. Typically, like when you are someone who has built up an audience and you're collaborating with brands, in the past, you almost always retained an agent or a manager who would essentially negotiate on your behalf and take a cut of whatever income that you derived. And so usually those people sometimes can take 25%, a manager, of your deals, which can be very sizable if you are doing very large deals. And so the model that we kind of pioneered to some degree is, it's fee only. So you keep 100% of what you make. You just pay us a flat amount every month, and we'll be kind of a coach on speed dial for you. So these 2 offers, we have a smattering of other things that we do. Obviously, I have a book coming out, which is I still kind of look at that as an offer, even though it's only probably going to be $20-$30 or something like that. And we've tried various challenges and paid things, but really those 2 things are our primary bread and butter. And if you kind of looked at where the revenue, and sponsorships, that's like another big income, source for us. So if you looked at it, I would say the course is like maybe, right now 40 to 50% of our income. Coaching is 20 to 30%, and then sponsorships makes up the remainder.
That is pretty sweet. I like how you say coach on speed dial. Like, having talked with you before and gone through just the process of finding a sponsor, it definitely feels like I felt like I needed a coach on speed dial. Speaking of which, your new book coming out, Sponsor Magnet, you told me something which I kind of think is an unbelievable deal, but anyone who goes to the link in the show notes below, hops on the wait list for this book, gets 15 scripts, basically how to respond to what various things brands might say over email. And because I've had this too, where it's like a brand said this, it's like, what do I do now? What do I say back? I just want the best deal possible. And you have scripts for this. Thank you for offering that. You want to share anything else about that?
Yeah, honestly, this is one of the biggest obstacles I've found for especially for creators who don't think sponsorships are for them, or sponsorships are really a meaningful revenue stream. They're like, I'd rather sell my own things directly, or whatever. They just think sponsorships are distasteful. And so what I've learned is that if you're armed with just some really simple, like, if then type scenarios, like if the brand says this, then say this. If you at the very least have something like that, you're going to be way ahead, because you'll look professional. You'll probably make more money, and the brand will probably want to hire you again. And so it's a lot of these things where you can educate yourself. And so yeah, I thought that would be a really fun kind of little bonus as part of this book launch.
I mean, that's a great bonus. That I feel like that could be its own offer in and of itself. Script to help you get the sponsorship deals that you want at like the price you want, so to speak. That's great. Thank you. I mean, a book, I love books because it's knowledge that the author took. I mean, how many mistakes and how many sponsorship deals would you say, on estimate, went into your journey before you created this book and just gave us like the best of the best wisdom that you gathered from all that?
Yeah. So, I mean, I have solid numbers because, since we started our very first sponsorship, I was using accounting software to create these invoices for these sponsors that we were working on. So my wife and I personally have done over 550 sponsorships, which has netted us over $5 million. And then when I ran an agency, which we'll probably get to in a bit, I did facilitated thousands of sponsorships for other creators. And so I have a lot of mistakes to pull from, a lot of wins to pull from. And I think really, That's what that's what this book is at its core. Is it's a distillation of a lot of those learnings.
I mean, that's huge. That's huge. So thank you for taking the time and the energy and going through the trials and tribulations to actually write this book. And because I know it's not easy, and I look forward to reading that. Take us back in time to when you decided, because you said your journey kind of started off as a creator, and you said that you were in the medical tools field before?
Medical devices. Yeah,
Medical devices, but your wife started out first on YouTube, is that right?
she did. Yeah, she was. Yeah. So she was a preschool teacher actually, and so I'm an engineer, kind of computer engineer by training, and again, like back in the day, like this was creating content on the internet was still very novel, right? It was like, when people found out that we were like uploading videos on YouTube, it was kind of a novelty. People would kind of poke us with a stick, like, "Oh, how's that YouTube thing going?" Like, "Oh, what are you talking about on there?" Right? My favorite was like when we started making a little bit of money. Everyone was so fascinated by that, like, that you could make money on the internet. Like, how do you make money doing that? That was always the next question when we said we had a YouTube channel or whatever. And so we'd have to explain it, and it was this whole thing. And so when my wife quit her job. So really, like, I think the most interesting part of the story is like when it was a side hustle for years, right? I think we see these like stories that like, oh, we like quit my job overnight, and like it was a rocket ship to success, and it was never like that, right? It was years of especially April, my wife, grinding essentially. Like this story I can tell is that so I wear an eye mask to sleep, okay, like to cross my eyes, and yeah, right. And but the reason that I started wearing an eye mask is because April would stay up after she got back from her preschool job. She would stay up literally until like 1, 2, 3 in the morning, grinding on YouTube. And so she wanted to have the lights on, and I was like, I gotta sleep, I gotta go to work. So I started wearing an eye mask. But like back in the day, this is what you did. I don't know if anyone listening still remembers when YouTube had an inbox. You could actually message people on YouTube. And so this was like the growth hack, is like you would message people and be like, oh, please subscribe to my channel, or you'd comment on other people's channels. And so you were just doing that. There was no bots, it was all manual, right? It was the grind. And so my April essentially we hustled to a point where she started making some pretty consistent income on both AdSense and sponsorships on her YouTube channel. She created multiple YouTube channels. So initially it was like a beauty and cosmetics skincare channel. That was her first channel. Then we started a cooking channel that we did together. Then we started kind of like a family vlog channel that we did together. And so we started the more family, the universe started expanding. And so she quit her job in 2012, her full-time job. And then I quit my full-time job in 2014, which was 6 weeks after our first son was born. So that was in and of itself was nerve-wracking. It was like quitting after having our first child. So that was like our creator journey was many years of grinding until we finally made enough to do it full-time.
I'm like trying to find the YouTube channel and I cannot find. Oh, is it Cook with April?
Cook with April is one of them. Yep, Cook with April. And then her first channel was April Athena 7.
Nice. Nice. That's a solid amount of subscribers. Okay, so you're an engineer by training. Then you were in the medical supply field. At what point, though, did her success really, I guess, motivate you to give it a go yourself?
Well, initially I was fully behind the camera. I was not like I was not talent, basically, right? I was like helping facilitate, helping her edit equipment, camera gear, like filming and stuff like that. But the one time her followers were like, hey, like do a boyfriend tag video, like I wasn't even a fiance at that time. I was a boyfriend. And so I got in front of the camera, and oh my God, dude, if you go back and watch these videos, they're still live on YouTube. It's so awkward. I was so awkward. I didn't know how to like be on camera. I felt so uncomfortable. And a lot of people say like, how are you so gregarious and outgoing on camera? Believe me, I was not like that in the beginning. I am now because I've done thousands of videos. But like, in the beginning, it was super uncomfortable. And so started doing that more, started doing more videos. But really it was when brands in earnest started reaching out regularly. And she basically just said, like, you're getting your MBA. Can you just like handle this? I hate this stuff. Like, I don't want to get on phone calls with brands or email with them. And I was like, I love this stuff. Sure, I'll do this. Right. But again, like I was making tons of mistakes. I was learning on the fly and getting on phone calls and trying to talk smart and, emailing our family lawyer and being like, hey, can you create a contract for us for this thing? And they're like, what are you doing, this thing on the internet that you're doing that
It
you
was
need this
so early
contract
back
for?
then. So like they
Yeah,
just had
so
templates.
early there. Yeah, that was
Yeah.
like not a thing. Right. And so this is I've always been interested in entrepreneurship, and I was doing my own kind of entrepreneurial side hustle things but really it was like my wife was like building this like YouTube empire under the radar here. And finally I realized like, well, I just need to like stop doing all these like side projects that aren't amounting to anything and like just fully support my wife. And that's when things started to grow.
Love it. I can relate with the early days of recording YouTube videos because my previous business, Elementary Chinese, I remember the first at least 20 videos, like people would still, you can still go back and read the comments. People be like, you're so scary, dude, because you never blink. And it was because I kind of was just scared and didn't know what I was doing in front of the cameras. And every like 8-minute video must have had at least like 30, 40 cuts. And somehow like I would just cut out all my blinking. So it just looked like
Oh man,
pretty creepy.
that's so funny. Yeah,
It's an
YouTube
art.
YouTube commenters are notoriously like very brutal.
Yeah, I love it. And then you click on their, you click through to their channel, and it's like they have 0 videos uploaded and 5 subscribers, 6 of which or 4 of which are their family probably, you know? But I love the armchair critics, you know? So I had read up, and you said that actually before Creator Wizard, you had started an agency with influencer marketer agency?
So I think that was like the kind of the next step of this journey was, things were going well. We were kind of like on autopilot with our business, but I've always been the person to just kind of like want to know where the puck was moving instead of like where it was at. And so I was always thinking like there's no way that this current level of success we can sustain that, right? Like there's especially in the family focus space, like a lot of the it's very driven by life milestones. So like, when my wife got pregnant with our first son, there was so much excitement and enthusiasm around that and the pregnancy journey and buying a new house and like all these like life milestones that people really get interested in and excited about. But like once those are over, right? It's like I just always thought like it's gonna wane. Like people are not gonna want to watch us for 50 years, basically, right? So I was always like, what can
Keep
we
having
do?
kids, bro.
Yeah, exactly. And I think a lot of people, no, I'm not saying any names, but I think a lot of people do that. But really, this was, I was like, we've got this kind of tiger by the tail, so to speak. How can we leverage the network and the experience set that we have right now into parlaying that into something to help diversify our family's income. And so the agency is this idea that I have that was like, look, like somehow it seems like these brands that we're working with keep coming back to us. And I tell my friends that who are also creators that we're like getting repeat deals, and they're like, how are you doing that? Because brands are only ever reaching out to us once. Would they do a deal with us and then they never talk to us again? And I was like, well, and so I would start asking these questions like, okay, well, are you putting together a wrap report at the end of the campaign where you're talking about learnings and opportunities for the next campaign and things? And they're like, no, what's that? Right. And so it's like these things that I would learn in the kind of a corporate setting that I applied to our career as creators. And so I started to realize there was like something we're doing differently than other friends that we had. And so I was like, what if I go to these brands that we're working with and say, hey, it was great working with you, but guess what? I've got this roster of a bunch of other great, amazing creators that, would love to work with you. What do you think? I could help kind of manage or facilitate, be the liaison for this campaign, and basically manage it for a campaign fee, essentially. And man, like that pitch was pretty compelling, especially because I had an angle on it. I said, we only work with family-friendly creators. That was like the angle, because back at this time, I don't know if you recall this, but like YouTube was going through like a brand safety crisis. There was a lot of these big brands where there was these exposés where their ads were being run against like hate content, where like videos, extremist contests, and like a bunch of these brands like Coca-Cola and Pepsi and like AT&T, they pulled all their advertising off of YouTube. I don't know if it was called the adpocalypse. It was like it
I
was
think
a big
was that
thing.
2019, 2018?
Yeah, it was a big deal. And so here I come with my pitch of like, we're only working with like, squeaky clean creators. And they're like, where do we sign? Right. And so it worked really well in the beginning. We started, signing lots of clients. I started hiring employees. We were working on these like, we started working on these like, big six-figure engagements, RFPs that we were responding to and things like that. And so it worked. It definitely worked in the beginning. But okay, here we go. Here's where the story turns. Is that lots of other people also identified that this was an opportunity, especially venture capital. And so a lot of startups started creating companies and creating, raising lots of venture dollars and creating these really slick software dashboards of things that I just didn't have as like a sole kind of small agency, basically, right? So imagine the ability to like use a dashboard to filter creators by every criteria you could imagine, where they live and their ages and their channels and their following and their demographics and all these things, which are, yes, useful. They're absolutely useful. But I just didn't have the financial means to compete with the tens of millions of dollars that some of these companies were raising. And I made the mistake of trying. I invested $50,000 of kind of my own money basically to create a dashboard for our client and try to emulate some of the things that we were doing. Because look, we were in these pitch meetings, and brands were saying like, "Hey, do you have dashboards like this other company?" I'm like, "Oh God," right? And so we would lose the deals. And so the long story short is that when COVID came, it crushed the business. I had to lay off all my employees. All the contracts that, a lot of the contracts that we had got pulled, the rug got pulled out from under them. And I was $100,000 in debt to top it all off. And so it was well, I had taken out lines of credit for, just general operating expenses, and hired some, kind of senior sales employees, thinking that was going to help with the whole process. There was a perfect storm of like awful things that happened that led to that. But it was like one of the darkest times of my life, man. It was like, I thought that this agency was going to be kind of, frankly, my family's ticket to like kind of diversifying the next chapter for us, and to kind of have it all fail and to be in huge amounts of debt. It was really humbling.
Whoa. And at that time, you had still only one kid or two?
I had two kids at this time. My youngest was 3. So my oldest was 7 or 6, and my youngest was 3 at that time when it failed.
Dang, I'm sorry, because I understand COVID wrecking like my life. So I can only imagine like what you thought was gonna be the ticket for your family completely unraveling. Plus everybody's quarantining. Plus you're like, what do I do?
Dude,
Wife and
it
2
was
kids.
brutal. It was brutal,
What were
dude.
some of the conversations like? What is this like around April, March?
Yeah, I mean, so yeah, like to your point, like to top it all off, like we were terrified of the global health crisis, and like, who knows? Like really, what the crux of it was is a lot of our clients were like retail, consumer electronic, consumer packaged goods, food, so like a lot of the categories that got eviscerated in terms of the advertising strategy had to change. And so like we, do you remember this thing where it was like, brands were still running these commercials with like people sharing a food or something, like, "Oh yeah, try this." And they're like, "Oh, this is so tone deaf. You're not social distancing." Like brands who didn't pull their ads in time, that they had like booked to buy a couple months ago or something. So it was just a crazy time. And so the conversation was just like, when is advertising ever going to come back in the same form that it was before? That was really what it was. And so like we were kind of steeling ourselves for it to be this kind of multi-year journey out of that, unwinding all that. And what ended up happening, thankfully, like Grace, like we were so fortunate that we still had kind of our personal social media businesses that we were doing. And basically what happened was that a lot of the brands, especially who were advertising for the Olympics, billions of dollars, had to divert those funds elsewhere because the Olympics were basically didn't happen, right? And so a lot of brands basically discovered like, oh, we can't do these big in-person production shoots anymore for TV ads. What can we do instead? What can we do with this money? Oh, wow, there's all these people on the internet who have really professional equipment, cameras and things like that. Let's go give them some of the money and make ads for us. And so that like year bizarrely was one of our best years ever personally because of that.
I mean, effectively, I see it on YouTube all the time. I don't know if the listener, like, is watching, like, YouTube videos, but it's like YouTube creators are set up to make commercials, especially the ones that have great gear, great editing chops, or a small team. It's like we are able to do that, and brands picked up definitely on that big time over the past, like, 5, 6 years. So, that's kind of what got you through. I don't know if you did I already tell you my story? About being stuck in Mexico because of COVID?
No.
Yeah, so, ba quickly, I was in China for 12 years and teaching English there, and then I started this business, Elementary Chinese, teaching Mandarin Chinese to expats who were living in China. Had a lot of fun, grew social media, nothing, like, super successful, but, like, business was growing. Then we took a vacation, with our 2 kids, me and my wife, 1 luggage, to Mexico because my wife would speak Spanish to our kids, and I really wanted to learn Spanish too, and so this was January 13th of 2020, and, then we got stuck in Mexico, then China shut down the borders, and since I had a business incorporated over there, and I was heavily niched to teaching folks in China how to learn Mandarin Chinese, like that, and nobody was running around using, like, my social method of learning. That's what crippled and then just decimated my business, and so, like, I can relate to you when you're having these conversations. I wasn't $100,000 in debt, but everything I was working up to at that point, like, I couldn't pivot, and so I was, like, in Mexico, and then, after the tourist visas expired, in the basement of my in-laws in Michigan, um, basically with no job, praying in circles, actually infinity signs in their big old basement, because when you, like, are walking and, like, crying in the morning and praying, you get dizzy in a circle, but if you do it in infinity, then you're always turning, and so you don't get dizzy. Like, that was my whole summer trying to survive the pandemic, and make it through, but yeah, and that was the genesis of me coaching online course creators and then doing Facebook ads, so I'm right there with you. That was a tough time.
Dude, it was it's thanks for sharing that, man, because I feel like this is the type of stuff that's not very often talked about on the internet because everyone wants to flex their wins and everyone wants to I think the reason that more people don't talk about failures and things like that, especially if we are trying to pitch ourselves as like this expert, right? Of a coach or an expert that you want to hire to help you do something. Somehow, if you share your failures, there's this fear. I had this fear that it was like, oh well, people won't want to hire me or trust me if I like say it seems like I don't want to know what I'm doing, right? People won't invest their money if like I talk about these failures that I have, and I actually think it's totally the opposite. I think people want to feel seen in you, and I have felt like I've gravitated to others so much more when they have opened up and been vulnerable about this types of thing because I feel like this is more the reality than the stratospheric rise to success, no failures along the way. Like that basically happens to no one, you know so I appreciate you sharing that, man.
Yeah, it's very, very true that at least most of the successful people I've talked to have had major failures, and a number of them. It seems to be like the number of failures is somehow correlated to the level of success that folks get, and yet I respect people who share their journey, and that's part of why, like, we're here today because people can see you as the creator wizard, and it's like your media is on point, everything seems to be going well, but then I find that I relate better with people who have had to pull up their belt straps or suspender straps or whatever you want to call it and go through some stuff to get to where they are. It's just we relate to that because a lot of us, most of us, struggle through something.
The one thing, not to go off on too much of a tangent here, but I do think it's important to talk about, which is like the thing that often doesn't get discussed is our partners, our spouses, our wives, our husbands. Um,
This is a good
and
tangent. We can talk
yeah,
about
yeah. It's the role that it's not easy being married to an entrepreneur. I know that for a fact. And so like, uh, I always have to remember, and I like bringing this up because like my wife has been so patient with me because like I am an entrepreneur, right? And it would be easy. I could have gone back to medical devices, or I've learned all this stuff. I could have gone and worked for a brand in marketing, or I could have done a lot of the things that I could have done, but she knows my DNA. She knows inside of me of like, I am an entrepreneur and I create things, and like, you know, it was not clear for a while there that there would be a path to success. And so like I just think it's so important to give a shout out to the partners in our lives who like put up with us essentially, because it takes a lot.
it. Does. It does. Those early morning, "Hey, I was thinking about this or I dreamed about this," and my wife is like, "Okay, tell me," and she's just so patient, as I'm telling her this, like, brilliant idea, even though, like, 80% of my ideas are trash, but she's still, like, letting me get it out because 'cause I'm a verbal processor too. I totally without our wives, without spouses, like, it's it would be a whole different game, so you were sharing how coming through the pandemic, you went through that. And I think, well, I know me, but I think the listener too is like, all right, so was that the genesis of Creator Wizard? Or did that come slightly later? Because now we're up to like at the time of the recording of this video, about 4 years ago.
Yeah, so that was the genesis, like a phoenix rising from the ashes. Well, actually, I wallowed for a couple months for sure. I was like, "Wow, my life sucks. I suck. I have no value. I have no idea what I'm going to do." So I definitely did some good wallowing there. It wasn't good, but it was solid. Um, and yeah, it was a good wallowing effort. Um, but then somewhere along the ways there, like kind of a couple months into it, I started thinking about this kind of pretty interesting perspective that I had now, where as you mentioned, kind of at the top about how I've been this creator in the trenches for many years, doing deals, but also now I've run this agency and I've kind of been in the room with these brands and these advertisers where they're saying, hey, we want to spend like $1 million, like across hundreds of creators. That's a very different strategy than a brand paying us 5 grand or something. That's like a very different conversation. And so I was like, you know what, that's actually kind of interesting. Maybe I should make some YouTube videos about these kind of behind the scenes secrets that I heard when I was having these conversations running the agency. And that's exactly what I did. So I started uploading some YouTube videos, and I never thought, dude, I never was like, oh, this is going to be my new business. I was like, I don't even know what the business is. It was just like, let me scratch the creative itch. I'm a YouTuber at heart. Let me make some YouTube videos. Right. And people liked them. They said, hey, can you make a video on this? Can you make a video on that? They started DMing me. They started emailing me. Then someone said, hey, I'm working on a deal right now. I don't have a manager. Can you help me? And so I was like, sure, I'll hop on a call with you and I'll pretend to be your manager. Basically, I'll just like be your advocate. Right. And so that was how I started doing one-on-one coaching. And from the beginning, I mentioned earlier, like from the beginning, I was very much like, I do not want to be a manager. I have I've worked with a lot of managers. I don't like that process. My wife and I had some horror stories of being with managers and networks and things like that in our early days. So I was like, I'm not doing a manager. I'm not taking a cut. I'm just not doing that. And so it wasn't clear to me like what the business model was going to be. Ultimately, it was like, okay, maybe I'll like coach people and I'll help them understand how to do this stuff. Then the idea, some people messaged me, hey, do you have a course? And I was like, I don't know. I know nothing at all about being a course creator. So I started, listening to Amy Porterfield's podcast and, just doing the whole thing. I was an idiot. I had no idea what I was doing. And so just like this incremental process of learning. So I launched a cohort course first. Then, honestly, only recently, 6 months to a year ago, launched the on-demand version, created a coaching program because a lot of our alumni were asking for that. And so it was just all of a sudden this like bit, I started a newsletter and that grew really significantly, which is actually a big part of my success. We could talk about that if it's interesting, the newsletter. But like, yeah, dude, this business has kind of sprouted up overnight. And really at the core of it, dude, is that my main advice that I give to people is just like, don't be like a diva. Don't be a Devo. Just like be easy to work with. Like, be responsible, be responsive, be communicative, and brands will want to hire you again. Like that is at its core. That is what I teach. And like the majority of the advice that's out there on the internet is not that. The majority is like brands are trying to screw you. Brands are the enemy. You gotta, get every last dollar off the table from them. And I was just like watching these TikToks, and I was like, this is terrible advice, right? And so I think that really was. A lot of people have told me like that was what they appreciated about me, is it just felt more practical than a lot of this hyperbolic advice out there on the internet.
I mean, you said it. I can't add anything more to that. I was thinking, how did we meet? And I believe it was at the time where I was asking folks in this group that I'm in, like, are there any like other genuine guys out there? And I think that's where your name had first come up. Or maybe it was a friend who mentioned you to me when I was getting sponsors for the podcast. I don't exactly remember, but what you just said made me think about like my quest for just genuine folks, not being divas.
Regardless of how you found me, both of those scenarios, that would make me very happy. And I think it actually speaks to a really important point about online business, is that from the beginning when I started doing this, I never my goal was just like, let me just help people. In the beginning, you couldn't even pay me. I wasn't coaching. I didn't have a course. I literally had no way that you could compensate me. And my goal was like, okay, let me just like be helpful to people. Let me give advice. Let me give, perspectives on things. And hopefully that will build goodwill. And to your point, like the holy grail is just like, if someone says, who do I talk to about this? And someone says, oh, go talk to that guy or go talk to that gal. And so like that was the strategy. It was just like, let me do a full court press on just being known as the sponsorship guy. That was like the goal. And so I hired a content strategist, and for literally, I said, okay, I want to put out 5 tweets a day, repurpose some of these into Instagram posts, and I'm just going to do this for 2 years straight. That's it. This is it. I'm going to talk about sponsorships over and over and over and over. And it was a risk, because it was like I was paying money. I had no income coming, or like no revenue coming in from this business. But I was like, I'm hiring this content strategist, and I just have this like, once I saw the early kernels of like interest into this space, I was like, okay, I'm going to go like double down on this. Like, I think this could be a thing. And just help people. Honestly, if someone is like releasing, a new podcast or launching something, I would DM them, hey, let me share it in the newsletter. Hey, I've got this newsletter with 5,000 creators, or now, it's up to almost 35,000. But like at the time, it was like, I was just like trying to help people, do favors. And it was never quid pro quo. It was never like, I'll do this for you. You do this for me. It was never that. Right. And so I think a lot of my success has come from just trying to just like be a good person and help people. And like, I think it all just comes back around.
I think in this next episode, when we talk about your book, if you could touch on this theme about how helping people in a way that's not designed just to go ahead and get their help in return, but just helping people out of the goodness of your heart, how that has contributed to other ideas that's gone into this book, that would be awesome.
100%, dude. 100%. Yeah. And funny enough, and we'll talk about it in the next episode, but like, um, I hired I'm a big fan of like hiring consultants, like to help me for things that I don't know what I'm doing. And so
The
I
ultimate
hired
shortcut.
yeah, it is, right? I hired my friend. I'm trying to open this water, and I like closed it like geez, this is so tight. This is, by the way, little inside baseball. This is the very first time that I'm recording in this new studio, because I recently moved. Terrible idea to turn on the fireplace. It's an oven in here. It looked cool. And I was like, you know what? You know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna turn it off right now because it's way too hot. Are you cool with that? I'm gonna turn this dang fireplace off.
Turn it off.
It's like an
No, but that is
oven.
great. I
Oh my
can't, listener,
God.
as he turns his
Oh my
fireplace
God.
off. That's so great. I was going to cover for you and just give a monologue about your book, but either way, as we finish this episode, I just want the listener remember, I put the link in the description below. Hop on the wait list to get his book, Sponsor Magnet, and you're gonna get 15 scripts. What, like, if then this that, if somebody says this, how do you respond? And the goal is obviously to get sponsors, and that is super valuable. So that link is in the description below. It's sponsormagnet.com/podcast.
I would say that if you have never thought that sponsorships were for you, This is something that happens a lot. I have a conversation with someone and I tell them what I do and they're like, I don't do sponsors. I don't want to like deal with brands, or I don't want to deal with them giving me feedback or creative edits, or that just seems terrible. I would prefer to just sell my own stuff or my coaching or my courses or books or whatever it is. And I just don't even want to deal with sponsors. Be open-minded. Be open-minded a bit about how profound of an impact that this can have on your business. The one anecdote I'll share is that I'm a course creator too. I have my book sponsor magnet, and I'm thinking very critically about how I can tap into brands and sponsors' customer bases to increase distribution for my book and increase enrollments in my course. So I think a lot of people think of sponsorships as like the only way in which it's valuable is that if the brand, if you talk about the brand to your kind of organic distribution, your audience, your following. But what I'm a big fan of is like trying to forge these deals where it makes a lot of sense for the brand to send out an email to their 100,000 customer base and be like, hey, Justin Moore's got this new book coming out, or Justin Moore's got this amazing course. You should go check it out. So it's like, those are the types of deals that you could forge when it's kind of this win-win thing. And so this is what I want to leave you with is like, if this is intriguing to you and you're like, well, I've never thought of doing something like that, then make sure to come on over into my universe, sponsormagnet.com/podcast.